36 vacancies that already exist. We've already hired 38 immigration judges this year, and we hope to have a full complement, to have all of the 345 judicial slots filled by the end of the year.
Are you going to realign, or are you in the process of realigning where they're at? And teleconferencing, things like that, do we use those kind of technologies?
We're looking at alignment, as in where we need the judges. Certainly we're going to put them in the places we think they're most valuable. I do hope to look at ways that we can operate more efficiently. You mentioned teleconferencing. You use technology to move these cases quicker. I don't think there's any, it's not good for anybody to have these cases pending for so long. The director of our Executive Office of Immigration Review recently left the department. We now have an acting director, and I plan to work closely with him and with his successor when we appoint a permanent director. And the challenge that I've given to him is, let's fill the vacancies, but let's also figure out whether there are efficiencies that we can implement, ways that we can move these cases through the system more quickly, because I think that's in everybody's interest.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I have several questions, then I'll go to Senator Shaheen. The Justice Department, it's my understanding, currently holds over $4 billion in forfeited and seized assets in a fund set up to compensate victims of the Bernie Madoff fraud. The department is now in year 6 of the fund, and to date, to my knowledge, no assets have been disbursed to victims. In addition, news reports indicate that the special master of this fund has collected over $40 million in fees. Questions have been raised about the methodology of making distributions and determine the validity of claims, like everything else, yes, that these methodologies are unorthodox and unworkable. Obviously, they're not working if there's been no distribution. Would the department be inclined to review this matter? In other words, look at this, there's something wrong here, and see if there is a manner in which these distributions can be made more quickly and efficiently, because the fund was set up to compensate the victims. You've been a prosecutor, still are. You got a comment on that?
Yes, sir, I agree with you. I think from the perspective of our prosecutors and agents, one of the most important things that we can do is to reimburse victims when we have funds available to do it. And I think we ought to
that was the purpose of the fund, wasn't it?
Yes, that's correct, and we should do it as quickly as possible. As I understand, I just learned about this issue this week, Senator, and so I need to look into it a bit more, but my understanding is the problem here was the volume of claims that we received. I understand 65,000 claims, and so it's a process of making sure that each one of those is dealt with individually, and then we don't distribute the money until we're confident about the pool of people who ought to receive it. So I do appreciate your concern, and I can commit to you, I'm going to look into that and figure out why it's taking so long.
Will you get back to the committee on this?
Yes, sir.
It's been raised by a number of people with us. Will you do that?
Yes, my understanding is that we have recently begun to notify claimants about decisions, so there's some people who are getting answers from us, but I will report back to you on that.
Thank you. Counterterrorism. How does the department's budget, 2018 budget, particularly funding for the FBI, improve its partnership with, say, with the United Kingdom and other Five Eyes partners in the global war on terror? And what benefits do you feel will come from a new bilateral agreement between the U.S. and the U.K. to expand data sharing in this area?
Thank you, Senator. National security is our highest priority, and the key to effectively combating terrorism is to work with our partners in foreign countries. So that is critically important to us. With regard to this issue of the bilateral agreement between the U.S. and the U.K., I think that that is critical to allow us to lawfully and efficiently access electronic data. Data sharing is critical, and of course one of the challenges is we share data, but we also need to maintain the confidentiality of data. What we introduced last month was a legislative proposal to enable bilateral agreements, and those key benefits would include helping our allies investigate and fight serious crime, reducing and eliminating conflicts of laws that put our technology companies in a difficult position. This is a challenge for American companies that have information. It may be lawful in one country, but not in another country to share it. And so this bilateral agreement process will allow us to bring our laws into harmony. And it will also accomplish other goals, such as reducing the incentive to localize data by companies. So we look forward to working with the Congress, and we look forward to addressing any other concerns that you may have about it.
Thank you. in the area of cybersecurity. Over the past couple of years, we've all witnessed serious data breaches occur in the U.S. government and also the private sector, including at some of the nation's largest companies and financial institutions. The Department is requesting additional funding in the year 2018 budget to combat cybercrime across several agencies, including the FBI, the National Security Division, the Criminal Division, and many U.S. attorneys' offices. The question here is, what is the Department proposing to do differently or additionally in 2018 to combat cybercrime that it is currently unable to accomplish with existing funds?
As I mentioned in my opening statement, Senator, cybercrime is an area of emerging challenges. Changes in technology constantly create new challenges for us. Some changes in technology actually are developed in an effort to defeat enforcement efforts. And so our enhancements include $41.5 million to enhance the FBI's cyber efforts. And that will include improving its technological tools and expanding high-speed networks. It includes $20 million to address threats posed by foreign intelligence and insiders, and $22 million to address this going dark problem, which I think is our most significant law enforcement challenge.
But you have a heck of a challenge here, do you not?
Yes, we do, and we have extraordinarily talented agents and prosecutors and support personnel, but this technology, Senator, is a tremendous challenge for us because they're always trying to stay a step ahead of us.
Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rosenstein, I very much appreciate the statements that you've made here this morning about your commitment to addressing the heroin and opioid epidemic. As you may be aware, in New Hampshire, we are second only to West Virginia in terms of the percentage of overdose deaths we have. And this year, sadly, we have seen carfentanil arrive in New Hampshire and have had 6 people die in the state from carfentanil. And I understand that the department is looking at reprioritizing efforts to address drug enforcement. But I guess I just disagree with you in a couple of areas. One is on eliminating the COPS Anti-Heroin Task Force grant program. Senator Feinstein talked about her efforts to start a focus on meth, which has been successful. It was looking at that successful model that Senator Leahy and I did in trying to direct some support to local law enforcement. And while I think a lot of our DEA agents and our federal law enforcement officials, they do a great job, we just don't have as many of them in New Hampshire as we do local law enforcement. And we need to provide some resources for local law enforcement because they're the people who day in and day out are actually on the front line. So I would urge you to go back and rethink whether eliminating that task force, the Anti-Heroin Task Force grant program, is really in the interest of what we're all trying to accomplish. And I would also ask what you're doing to address you talked about meeting with China to look at what we're seeing in mail order drugs that are coming into the United States. There was a story this weekend by the New York Times reporting on the dark web that is being used to sell synthetic drugs and opioids like fentanyl. Can you tell me what you're doing to shut down those sites?
Yes, Senator. First of all, with regard to the task forces, I completely respect your view on that. The point I'd simply like to make is we have different ways of addressing the same issue, but we are committed to spending more resources on heroin and opioid drugs.
Can I just interrupt you? Because the other issue that has been brought up by several of my colleagues has been the drug courts, which we have found to be very effective in New Hampshire, and yet you've reduced funding for drug courts in the 2018 budget.
I had the number. I'm not certain about the reduction in drugs.
From $43 million to $40 million.
Okay, right.
And while may not seem...
All right, everyone, we're going to cut out of this. We'll go back to it in a moment, but we're getting a live press conference from Georgia. In case you missed it, 2 correctional officers killed, 2 inmates have escaped.
31 prisoners on the bus. Excuse me, 32, 3, counting the 2 that escaped.
Right. So 33 prisoners. And how were they able to get access, and what's the security situation on those buses as far as making sure these guys can't get access to these weapons?
That's part of the investigation right now. As you know, we have secure vehicles, and that should not have happened, so we're investigating that as you speak.
And there was only 2 correctional officers on that bus?
That's accurate.
And that's normal?
That is normal.
Routine.
That's protocol. Yes, sir.
And we understand they were on a work detail, so were they out?
No, they were in transport. They were not on work detail. They were transport from one facility to another.
You guys are all law enforcement is a family.
Yes.
But when it's and that's not to minimize the sheriff's, what the feelings he's feeling, but when it's your department, it's got to hit really hard.
Yes, this morning at approximately 7:30, I received a call. My heart is still in the shoes of my souls today. It brings tears to my heart, brings tears to my eyes. I will say that the outreach and pouring, first and foremost, by the sheriff and his team has been phenomenal. But the rest of law enforcement across this state has just been overwhelming as far as their support.
When's the last time you folks have had any officers killed like this?
Last time we had someone die in the line of duty was in 2012. We had an officer at Telfair State Prison, Officer Stell, that was killed inside the prison.
How about on a transport facility? Do you know that?
I do not know when the last transport officer was killed. No, sir. Sheriff,
if I can bring you back in, I apologize. But Sheriff, where do we go with, how do we get these guys?
We get these guys by the public looking for this green Honda Civic. That's what we need. We need somebody to find this car, find these individuals. They're armed, they're dangerous. Call 911 if you see it immediately.
Obviously, don't approach them.
Obviously not. Don't approach them. We have no idea where they are at this point in time. They've had several hours before we were ever able to identify who they were. So we need somebody to find. It's a grass green, this way it's described, 2004 Honda Civic. I've given you the license, 4-door. We need to find that vehicle. They may well have dumped that vehicle and stolen another car. Any reports of auto thefts or carjacking right now are crucial that we know those anywhere in the state.
And they have the weapons that obviously...
They are armed with 40 caliber Glock pistols, 2 of them.
The person who was carjacked this morning, what do we know about that person?
He's a local resident here. They just happened to be coming along at the wrong time.
Was he injured? He
was not injured. He stopped. He thought it was a work detail. He stopped. The bus was stopped in the road, so he stopped. The next thing he knew, 2 guys approached him armed with pistols. He exited his vehicle and flagged down the first car that came by.
What can you tell us? I mean, you gave us that this is an extensive criminal record for these 2. Where are they from? Where might they have ties, especially for folks who live in those areas?
Dubose is from Madison County, Comer, Georgia. That's the last address before he went to prison. He was last arrested by the Elbert County Sheriff's Office in Elberton, which is a neighboring county. Mr. Rose, originally from Tennessee, from Middle Tennessee.
Do you know if the gentleman who was carjacked, did he have anything else stolen, money?
His cell phone, but we know generally, the evidence appears that the prisoners threw the cell phone out of the car not far from the scene. We're looking for it this time.
So on the bus, these 2 inmates, they were able to grab the weapon.
Yeah, I can only tell you that one corrections officer was driving the bus. This is a big bus. There was another officer up front and a seat adjacent to him. They went through the gate. I can't tell you how the gate got opened. It should have been locked. It may have been locked. I have no idea. They obviously, according to the other prisoners who are witnesses, have told us that they overpowered them, that there was an physical altercation, and took sidearms away from them.
And they shot them on the bus.
They were both shot on their bus. I have their blood on my shoes.
We get your name? I'm sorry, I apologize.
My name is Greg Dozier, D-O-Z-I-E-R, Commissioner of the Georgia Department of Corrections.
I know this sounds silly, just for the folks back there, G-R-E-G?
Yes, sir, G-R-E-G.
Sheriff, was the bus moving when this started?
Well, obviously it was moving when it started. I mean, that goes without saying.
No, I didn't know if they had stopped for some reason.
No, they had not stopped. This vehicle was found running in the middle of the roadway. Well, not in the middle of the roadway, but in the lane it was supposed to be.
Have you been able to speak to the families of the correctional officers, and how are they doing? How are they holding up?
We have spoken to the families. As you can imagine, they are shooken and they are distraught right now, just as you and I would be.
Can we have their names again? And if you can, do you have their spelling?
I'm gonna give you something on all of them.
Are these, and not that this minimizes one way or the other, but are these family folks? Do they leave behind kids? Any of that type? Anything you can tell us about that?
One was married, left behind a wife. I'm not sure about kids at this point. The other one was not married, and we have spoken to his next of kin.
And which one was married? Can you tell us?
I don't recall, sir.
Well, regardless, I mean, you have to feel the pain of these families, and this is part of your family.
Absolutely, they are part of our family. The GDC family runs deep, and I feel for them, and we feel for the officers that work with them on a daily basis. And honestly, it hit each one of us very hard, and we're still struggling with that.
I'm sure that's.
And we will use, the one thing that the sheriff and us and all the other law enforcement agencies, you asked about that, we'll use all resources necessary to find these individuals.
What's your message to these two escaped inmates if they happen to see this on TV? What's the message?
Well, I would suggest they surrender before we find them.
I would say it's just a tragic day, and they've had a past of crime, and they've chosen to take a future in crime, and that's not the message that they should continue forward. And we will find them, and they will pay the price.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you, Sheriff.
Okay, thank y'all.
Good job. Around the pants. See the blood.
You won't be able to see that.
No worries.
All right, everyone, that's the end of that press conference. I want to go ahead and show you guys some of the images of these suspects that are wanted in this terrible, terrible story. This is one of the suspects, and this is the other. Again, these two are armed and dangerous. They overpowered the prison guards on the bus, took the guns from the guards, and then killed them both. The individuals then fled. They carjacked a Honda Civic, and they are on the run. They are wanted and dangerous. Again, these are two inmates on the run, 2 officers killed. The Putnam County Sheriff's Office said about 30 other inmates were on this prison bus when 2 inmates overpowered the guards. One of the inmates shot and killed them. At this point, it's not clear which of the escaped inmates did the killing. But again, this inmate is wanted, as is this inmate. The escaped prisoners have been identified as Donnie Russell Rowe, 43 years old, and Ricky DuBose, 24 years old. Now, Rowe, whose nickname is Whiskey, was convicted of armed robbery and is in prison for life without parole. DuBose was also convicted of armed robbery. Rowe has been in prison since 2002. DuBose has been in prison just since July of 2015. Again, the Georgia officials there are urging the public not to approach the men and to instead call 911 if they spot them. The prisoners are armed with pistols that belong to the officers. Authorities are searching for the suspects after the incident. This incident took place southeast of Atlanta. Now, U.S. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein condemned the killings and said during a testimony this morning before a Senate budget panel that federal resources are being committed to help catch these fugitives. Rosenstein said, "An attack on any American law enforcement officer is an attack on every American law enforcement officer and the principles we all believe in." These are the two inmates. The victims in this tragedy are Christopher Monica and Curtis Billou, both employees with the Georgia Department of Corrections. Again, this is a developing story. Just wanted to give you guys an update here. It looks like the hearings have wrapped up. I'll take you back now to Capitol Hill. As you can see, this Department of Defense hearing has wrapped up, but McCain looks like he's speaking with some other officials right after the hearing. Again, there were multiple hearings this morning. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein testified at a hearing today about the DOJ budget as well as the Russia investigation. Meanwhile, Secretary of Defense Mattis, who you can see the back of his head right there, testifying at another hearing regarding the defense budget. You can see that was the Senate Armed Services Committee.
Yeah, we've done the story.
It just wrapped up. Of course, we'll go back to it later today, give you a replay of it since we missed it here on News Now. In the meantime, though, another event happened this morning. House Republicans holding their weekly press conference. We heard from Paul Ryan and more. Let's go ahead and listen in. Russia investigation.
And
Meanwhile,
Tester,
Secretary
to bring this bill forward in a bipartisan, bicameral way. And I want to thank our leadership for bringing it to the floor today. And most importantly, this will help our veterans get the best care that they've earned and deserve.
Thank you, Phil. I'm Brad Winstrup, and I chair the House Subcommittee on Health, and I'm an Iraq veteran and proud to serve in this capacity today. You know, we talk about values, and the Army values, we use an acronym called LEADERSHIP: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. And all the branches have values similar to that. And with that comes accountability. And that's probably the most important thing when you're putting together a team. When I served as a surgeon in Iraq, I can tell you some things that you never forget. And I can remember seeing a Marine come in that was lifeless, and we worked together as a team and brought them back and saved their lives. But that depends on a team where everyone is accountable. And so what we're doing at the VA is trying to instill that same type of team approach. And what we have done with this bill, it's fair, and it's fair to the good people that work at the VA. There's a process that's fair. Whistleblowers are protected. And it allows for the core mission of executives and employees to serve those that have served us so well. So I'm very pleased. I want to thank everyone who did participate in this on both sides of the aisle, like Dr. Rose said, and both in the House and Senate, that we can get this done on behalf of our veterans. Thank you.
I too want to thank Chairman Rowe, Winstrup, and all their work on the VA committee. They have moved a bill Congresses prior, this Congress, and now we're able to get it back from the Senate. We cannot expect the Secretary of the VA to change the culture if the leadership does not have the power to do it. You cannot expect those who continue to work at the VA to care for the veterans that are such good employees to continue to do their work if they had the bad apples continue to survive. Just a couple stories. There was a VA employee that had to serve time in jail. Took a leave while they served their time in jail, then went right back to work. Or the story of an individual that had been drunk and was performing a surgery. nobody would allow to be able to continue to do that job anywhere else in the country. And why would we ever allow that to caring for our veterans? We should expect the very best, because the veterans do the very most for us to protect our freedom when they went to serve. So we want to change the culture. Let's empower the leadership to be able to have the tools to be able to change the culture, to be able to care for our veterans. That's exactly what this bill will do, and protect the whistleblowers to make the culture better. Also on the floor this week, we'll be moving into our third phase of health care. Remember, our first phase, passing the bill. Our second one is dealing with the Tom prices, and our third one are those bills that take.
All right, everyone, we're going to take you to tape playback now. President Trump having lunch with members of Congress. This should be starting momentarily. Again, President Trump, tape playback from the White House. Trump having lunch with members of Congress. All right, everyone, it looks like it is taking a moment before this tape playback begins, so we'll go back to it once it starts. In the meantime, I'll take you back to that House GOP press conference. McCarthy speaking now.
The medical malpractice system, this is tort reform, one of the large drivers to the rise of cost in health care. Verifying Act to stop waste and fraud related to the tax credit. The Veteran Act to give the veterans access to private care. And the Broader Options for America Act, helping people on COBRA coverage not to fall through the cracks. This is very important that we continue to keep our promise. Many of you have probably read the CMS report of up almost to 2 million people that have stopped paying the premiums inside Obamacare because of the cost and the rise of the premiums. When you look at the study, you understand that more people took the penalty or the waiver than actually signed up for Obamacare. And how many stories do we have to continue to hear, such as within Iowa, where 94 out of 99 counties will not have care because of the collapse, or 18 of the 23 co-ops that have collapsed. Now is the time to act for the Senate to move the bill and bring it back to the House.
Friday night I went to an event at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, and it really shows you the power and the might of the United States military, the tools that allowed us to go win that war with the Higgins boats, and you see big bombers. But you also see the human price of war, the cost, with so many stories chronicling the brave people who served the United States and gave their life, paid the ultimate price to defend our freedoms during World War II. Tom Brokaw was there, and he talked about the greatest generation, and talked about how he still gets people coming up to him from World War II that just didn't want to talk about it at the time, but are now willing to share their stories. And of course, we lose so many every day. Our veterans deserve the highest quality of care. They delivered for us, and we've got to deliver for them. We've got so many great people that work at the VA, but we've seen, unfortunately, stories of bad apples. And what frustrates not only our veterans, but the good people that work at the VA is when they see that there is not accountability for the people who are working at the VA and not.
Take you back to that President Trump lunch.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. Very happy that you're all here today. Republican senators, we're going to be discussing the urgent need to repeal and replace the disaster known as Obamacare. It was just announced yesterday that 2 million people have dropped out of Obamacare, 2 million additional. They're leaving fast. Premiums have increased by an average of more than 100% nationwide. In North Carolina, premiums have gone up 176%. In Arkansas, premiums have gone up 128%. In Pennsylvania, premiums have gone up by 120%. And I hate to say this to you, Lisa, but in Alaska, they've gone up 207% on Obamacare. You know, I used to mention only Arizona because they were up 116% in Arizona. Now Arizona is like good by comparison to some of the numbers, but they're way up in Arizona also. Insurers are fleeing the market. Last week it was announced that one of the largest insurers is pulling out of Ohio, great state of Ohio. That could mean another 20 counties, at least 19,000 people in Ohio will have no plan at all. Nationwide, 1 in 3 U.S. counties have only a single insurer, and many of those insurers, as you know, have announced that they're leaving. Obamacare has been broken, and it's been a broken promise. One after another, Americans were told that if you liked your doctor, you'll keep your doctor. That was a lie. They were told that if you liked your plan, you'd keep your plan. That was a lie. Americans were told the premiums would go down by $2,500 per year, and instead their premiums went up to levels that nobody thought even possible. The House has passed a bill, and now the Senate is working very, very hard, and specifically the folks in this room, and I really appreciate what you're doing, to come out with a bill that's going to be a phenomenal bill for the people of our country. Generous, kind, with heart. That's what I'm saying. And that may be adding additional money into it. We're going to come out with a real bill, not Obamacare. And the results are going to be fantastic, and hopefully it'll be announced at the appropriate time, and everyone's going to be happy. But by contrast, Republicans in Congress, as hard as they're working, you have the Democrats on the other side who truly have become obstructionists. Even their new motto, resist. And I guess it's a pretty accurate motto. Every time I see it, I say, that's right. That does represent the Democrats. It's called resist. And it's very unfortunate. And I actually said, if we came up with the greatest health care plan or tax cut, because we're coming out with massive tax cut and tax reform, but if we came up with the greatest health care or tax cut ever in our country's history, we wouldn't get one Democrat vote. It's obstruction. So the Republicans are working hard. We've passed and signed 38 pieces of legislation, which nobody likes to talk about. I think probably seldom has any president and administration done more or had more success so early on, including a record number of resolutions to eliminate job-killing regulations. And we see it all over the country where jobs are starting that would never have started ever under any circumstances. So I'd like to thank our great vice president for being here. I'd like to thank all of the senators who I have so much respect for. I've gotten to know and love some of them and know and like others. But I have great relationships with every one of them. And I'll tell you what, I do have a lot of respect for the people in this room. I can tell you that very much, and I appreciate you being here. Just a little bit on the economy. Unemployment has fallen to a 16-year low, and manufacturing confidence is at an all-time high. Just came out with a report, the highest level of confidence in the history of the reports, which are, they've been taking these statistics for many, many years, Mike, I'll tell you. And in the history of this report, the confidence level is at the highest point it's ever been. Companies are moving back into the United States. You see it in Michigan where the auto companies are coming back in and they're expanding their existing plants. And they're saying, well, maybe we're just going to have to build in the United States, and that's the way it's going to be. I was also really thrilled last week, and had a lot to do with even their opening ceremony, where in Pennsylvania they're opening a brand new coal mine. That's the first coal mine that's opened in this country in a long time. It's brand new. Many of them are being reopened, but this is a brand new mine. That hasn't happened for many, many years. So we're keeping our promise to the American people, and that's why it's so important for the Senate and the senators that are with us today to come up with a great health care plan. and I really believe they're going to be able to do it. We're very close, and I really believe they're going to be able to do it. So the economy is great. Everything seems to be working really well, and a very big focus for us over the next short period of time are going to be tax cuts, tax reform. We're going to be putting in a very major infrastructure plan, and for this group in particular, we're going to be focused on Obamacare, repeal and replace. I've been talking about repealing and replacing Obamacare now for almost 2 years. Don't forget, on June 16th, June 14th is my birthday, but June 16th was the day I announced that I was running. Some people said, really? That going to happen? And it happened. But it's been exactly, so in 3 days, it's exactly 2 years, Johnny. So we're very happy about that. And from day one, I said, we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare, and that's what we're going to do. So we've kept our promises. We've gotten rid of the regulations. The economy is going really well and going to get even a lot better. Numbers for the quarter are going to be very good, I believe. When the numbers are announced, the GDP numbers, I think they're going to be shockingly good based on all of the facts that we're hearing and based on the enthusiasm from the businesses because they're doing well. And we've just started. So I want to thank you all, and I want to thank you, senators, for all being here. We appreciate it. And now what we'll do is we'll start talking about the replacement for Obamacare, which will be far better than Obamacare. Thank you very much.
What's your time frame, Mr. President?
As soon as we can do it. As soon as we can do it. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, everyone, so that's the end of that tape playback. We're going to take you now to a live press conference coming in. Let's listen in.
Her relationship with Constant. Statement of Marguerite Jackson. I, Marguerite Jackson.
This is related to the Cosby trial.
Woodcrest Avenue in Philadelphia, PA. I am employed by Temple University and have been for the past 30 years. I am a student advisor. In this role, I have supported various departments to include the Fox School of Business, Athletics, and Music and Dance. From approximately 2002 until 2006, I was assigned to academic advising for student athletics. My role as advisor to the departments is to ensure the students are on track academically. As a result, I worked closely with Andrea Constant, who at that time was the operations manager of the women's basketball team. Andrea and I had regular contact and as a result became friends. As a function of my position, I would travel with the team occasionally. As I recall, I traveled with the team approximately 6 times. On each occasion, Andrea and I shared a hotel room. Although I cannot recall the specific year, there was an occasion I traveled with the team to Rhode Island. During our stay, Andrea and I shared a room. I recall the television was on. We were watching the news. There was a news story of a high-profile individual who was accused of drugging women and sexually assaulting them. It was a well-publicized case. The news story piqued Andrea's interest. She told me that something similar had happened to her. I was shocked. I asked her if she had filed charges. She said she had not. I asked her why, and she said that like the story on the news, the person who had drugged and done something to her sexually was a high-profile person. I responded telling Andrea that it didn't matter who the person is, she should have reported it. I then asked Andrea if what she was saying really happened. Her response was that it had not happened, but she could say it happened and file charges, file a civil suit, get the money, go to school and open up a business. Andrea and I never discussed the matter again. It was about a year later that Andrea left Temple, and then I learned she went to the authorities and claimed that Bill Cosby had drugged and sexually assaulted her. I wasn't shocked since this was exactly what Andrea said she could do, and so she did it. I, Marguerite Jackson, state that the foregoing statement of one page is true and correct. I am giving this statement freely and voluntarily. No one has threatened or intimidated me to provide the statement, nor have I been offered a reward. Marguerite Jackson, November 20th, 2016. And they would not let this woman be our witness on behalf of Mr. Cosby on yesterday. And this could have probably, we don't know what the outcome is going to be, but this is profound. And it wasn't hearsay. And Ms. Constance says she did not know this woman, and she really did.
So this was not admitted into evidence. So why is it important now that you're bringing this information out, since it was not admitted into evidence?
Well, I think it's very important. I brought it up yesterday. I think she was a key component to be a part of our case, and I think the public needs to know that what Ms. Constance has done is not been truthful. She has not told the truth. She said on the witness stand under oath when Ms. Agrusa was examining her, she said, "Do you know Margot Jackson?" She said, "I don't know her." So I think it's important to let the public know that she was under oath, and she said she did not know the woman. And this woman was not allowed to be a part of our case.
But Andrew, you're saying that in the letter, in that statement, she says that Andrea Constance said it did happen to her.
She said
and then said it didn't happen.
Said it did not happen to her.
First she said it did.
First she said it did, then she came back and said, if it happened to you, you should report it to the authorities. She said, no, it did not happen to me, and never reported. And then she looked at the news a year later after Andrea Constance left, and Andrea had filed claims against Bill Cosby.
Would that have been her deciding she didn't want to tell this woman that it really happened? She told
No,
her
I think she was watching the news, she saw something, she said something happened. But if you're a true victim and you could announce that to your roommate, and your roommate is being supportive of you and saying go and tell the authorities, the proper authorities, this person should not be able to get away with this. And she had the backing, she had the encouragement. You know, a lot of these victims have said, I couldn't tell anyone. People were not going to believe me. Well, all she had to do, she had a witness in the room who she told. That witness could have corroborated her story. They were roommates. They were traveling together with the Temple women's basketball team.
That wasn't sufficient to say that she knew her?
They said it wasn't sufficient. That's what the judge said. He said it would have been hearsay.
Mr. White, you are reading into the public something that a judge decided would not be allowed into evidence, calling it hearsay. You're trying to influence the court of public opinion. If it was so important, why do you think the judge didn't let it in? I mean, if the judge is the final arbiter of what's going on here, and every time we've heard the court case, Brian McMonagle has been very positive toward the judge and the actions of this court.
I think this court we've had more objections overruled and everything overruled on our part. I think this court has not given Mr. C a fair and impartial trial that he has asked for. He had the right to have his witness to be able to come forward. I don't look at it as hearsay. All you had to do was get the witness, let her come on the witness stand and say what she knew. You had the prosecution who could have cross-examined her. That's all we were looking for, just a fair shot for Mr. C.
So you're saying that you don't believe it's a fair shot because every time we've been in the courtroom, we have not heard that from Mr. McMonagle at all during the trial. Where
well, Mr. McMonagle is legal counsel, and he's going to always pay respect to the judge and the judge's role in the court system. He practices here. But we all know, and you guys have seen how we have put information out there, our cross-examinations, how we have tried to put information in and it's gotten thrown out. So it has happened to us. But I think it was just important for you guys to hear and know that this person is out here and they wanted to get their statement out and their voice to be heard. Not in support of Mr. C, but in support of the truth and what has taken place.
So what is the truth in your mind? That Mr. Cosby is innocent of these charges?
Look,
we just want to make sure.
Look, I wasn't there, but Mr. Cosby, through his attorneys, have vehemently denied it, and he's come to trial to fight it, and we've done a great job of fighting it. You saw the inconsistencies yesterday in the DA's closing arguments, where he put a lot of fiction in those arguments to try to sway the jury. I think that's what the jury is looking at now. They're looking at everything that was, and they're coming back saying, show us this, show us that, because it's questionable. Right.
Mr. White,
the statement again. When exactly did this happen again?
This statement, she published this statement to us on November 20th, 2016.
When did read it again.
you read it again?
Well, what I would do, I will have the statement. I'll get copies and get copies handed out to you.
What do you think you'll achieve by making public what the judge has not accepted as evidence?
Well, I think Marguerite Jackson is very disappointed. She's highly disappointed, and she wants her voice to be heard. She has called and asked us to make sure her voice is heard, and she wants people to know that she wanted her statement to be public.
You're undermining, though, aren't you?
And the judge just released it so it could be public.
Mr. Wyatt, there is a possibility that Mr. Cosby could be found guilty of 1 or 3 of the charges. If he is found guilty, has Mr. Cosby set his mind that he may be going to jail?
Look, we're thinking positive, and Mr. Cosby's thinking positive, and we're confident that these jurors are going to review the facts of the case, and they're going to make the right decision. And we're going to have to live and abide by it. That's the system that we live under.
If Mr. Cosby is found guilty, will he appeal?
Yes, he will appeal. Yes. Anybody will appeal, I would hope so. Right, thank you.
So just one last question. So how is he doing now?
Mr. Cosby's doing good, spirits are great, and he's just looking for a positive outcome.
You think he's positive?
Yeah, he's positive.
Yeah?
Yes. Thank you.
Come on, last. Anthony.
All right, so that was a member of Cosby's legal team speaking to the press. He asserted that Bill Cosby hasn't had a fair trial, and one reporter asked if Cosby would appeal the case, and it sounds like it would. Looks like Lori Allred speaking next.
Well, in reference to what Mr. Cosby's spokesperson just indicated, in reference to his or their disappointment that Marguerite Jackson could not testify, number one, the court did not disclose its reasons why Ms. Jackson did not testify, but it may have, there I'm sure were good reasons that the court would have. I will say that the defense has said that I represented 10 out of the 13 prior bad act accusers of Mr. Cosby, whom the prosecution wished to call. And I can tell you that there was disappointment among some of the accusers that they were not permitted to testify. So, this is just the way it is in a trial. A court makes its decisions. I just wanted to, and I don't have any information that Ms. Jackson has testified under oath in the civil lawsuit, and I don't have information as to when, if at all, she came forward, what her motives are, what her biases might be, if any. I don't know what her agenda is. So, she may have good motives, she may not, she might have bad motives, she may, I don't know.
Gloria,
I have no information. I've never met Ms. Jackson.
would it be surprising or understandable if a woman who was a victim of sexual assault would confess to it and then recant it almost immediately to a friend or a coworker?
I don't have any information that would lead me to believe, and I've seen no evidence that Andrea Constant recanted or revised her allegation that Mr. Cosby had drugged and sexually assaulted her. In other words, I've seen no admissible evidence of that anywhere. If it exists, I haven't seen it. I don't know of anyone who has seen it.
In terms of behavior, does that sound like the behavior of someone who was a victim?
I would say that if the defense had evidence of that, my sense is that they would have put that on. And they did not put it on. They did not put it on in any form. And we have Mr. Cosby's own admission under oath that he provided 3 pills, that she didn't consent, Andrea, that he found Andrea Constant to be truthful, and that he digitally penetrated her and groped her breasts after she had taken those pills. So the only issue in this case is consent.
Are you concerned by this late intervention?
Am I concerned by what?
Are you concerned that we're now hearing this?
Am I concerned that we're now hearing this? I'm never surprised by any defense tricks, spin, last-minute appeals in defense of Mr. Cosby, whether in the court of public opinion or in the court of law. No, nothing surprises me. But the jurors did ask a question within the last hour, and that had to do with count 3, which, if you look at count 3, and I can't read it, it's very small on my computer, but it had to do without her knowledge, that the drug was administered without her knowledge. They wanted to know what that meant, and the court could not define that for them. But I think as I read the charge, which I did, it would also be without her knowledge, not only of taking the drug, but of an intent to undermine her resistance. So a fair reading of it is a bit ambiguous, but I think it could be read that not just knowledge that she was taking a pill, but what was the purpose of the person providing the drug. And I think that the intent really is about the intent of the person providing it, and was it with an intent to overcome her resistance for sexual purposes. So we'll see how the jury reads it. They now have no direction or instruction from the court about how to interpret it. That happens sometimes. And they're going to just have to debate that among themselves, what that means.
Ms. Allred, I just want to be clear, your reaction to what Mr. Wyatt just said, reading a statement from someone that the defense wanted to have as a witness, the judge didn't allow it in, it would be considered hearsay. Your reaction to that he would use this public forum to read a statement?
Well, hearsay, and not within any exception to the hearsay rule, and therefore may not be admissible if it is hearsay without a legal exception. So the judge has ruled it's not admissible in the court of law. The judge also ruled, as I said, that many of the accusers that I represent, other than Kelly Johnson, whom I also represent and testified, also could not be heard and could not testify. So, his complaint is about one, and, there are other accusers who would also be concerned that they couldn't testify. Would she be believed if she were permitted to testify? We'll never know, because she's not permitted to testify. There it is. I don't know what they're trying to do. Are they trying to suggest that, trying to kind of lay the foundation for a potential verdict that might not be favorable to them? I don't know what their purpose in doing that at this moment is. I guess to create doubt in the court and public opinion. Right now, what matters is the court of law and the jury. And they're looking at the evidence. That's not evidence they're going to see. You note that during the trial, there was no mention of the other accusers, only of Kelly Johnson, because that was essentially prohibited. So there it is. Until this moment, when I'm responding to your question, I haven't said anything about the fact that many other accusers were not permitted to testify, although they would have had they been subpoenaed and had they been permitted to testify. So, they can come out, they can do their whining or arguing, depending on your point of view. The jury's not going to see it, is not going to hear it, and that's it. They had their chance to present a defense. They presented 6 minutes. What are they trying to say? Their whole defense would have hinged on the testimony of Marguerite Jackson Really? That's all they have?
Corey, as an attorney, what do you make about the questions the jury's been asking so far today and yesterday?
Well, they also asked for a readback earlier today of a great deal of testimony of Mr. Cosby. That's testimony under oath in Andrea Constant's lawsuit. Where he recounted his version of what happened on the night in question, you know, his romantic interest in Ms. Constant, his providing of pills, you know, his recounting of what he would, you know, after that, his groping of her breasts, his digital penetration of her. He talked about her orgasm, and that would be a good thing. I don't know if that's Dr. Huxtable or if it's Bill Cosby. So if he's trying to say what's good for her health, I have to question why the pills. I mean, to relax, to go to sleep. He's testified in the past that Benadryl's put him to sleep. The prosecution has argued that if a woman is asleep and then there is sexual advances or groping or digital penetration while a woman is asleep, that's not romance, that's a criminal act, because she can't consent if she's asleep or if she's under the influence of any intoxicant. So we'll have to see how the jury sorts all that out.
Ms. Allred, how many of your clients have been at the courtroom since we began?
Of my clients, there's one here today. Ms. Johnson, who testified, is not in the state at this time.
Ms. Allred, how is Andrea feeling? Tell us what goes through her mind.
Oh, I don't represent Andrea, so I can't tell you how she feels. But I'm not in communication with her.
Any of the other accusers?
Well, the other individuals that I represent who are, you know, have accused Mr. Cosby are anticipating the verdict, wondering when the verdict, you know, will be announced, and have some concern about what the verdict will be. Just hoping there will be justice in this case. So we'll have to see.
Would you say more concern than optimism?
I mean, I don't know whether they're cautiously optimistic or not. You know, my view is we never know what a jury's going to do. I mean, the prosecution has said this is a simple case. You know, but we're glad the jury's taking time to and being thoughtful and asking questions. That's a good thing. Hopefully they understand the implications of this verdict, and so they'll take their time and they'll probably debate with each other, argue with each other, hopefully in a positive way, and if they can reach a unanimous decision, then the verdict will be announced.
Gloria, how do you interpret the fact that Mr. Wise has just read the statement from Ms. Jackson? What's your interpretation of that?
You know,
even before the verdict?
I don't know what his purpose is. I mean, is he setting it up so that if there's a verdict against Mr. Cosby that he can say, oh, well, if only Marguerite Jackson could have testified.
All right, everyone, that's the end of that Cosby trial update. We're going to take you back now to that GOP press conference from earlier. House GOP members speaking out.
And so the legislation that Dr. Rowe and Dr. Wenstrup are bringing forward to the House floor is so important to, number one, make sure that we're following through on our commitment to our veterans who actually paid that sacrifice for our nation and for our freedoms, that we're standing up for them and we're standing up for the taxpayers of the United States who expect nothing less than the highest quality of care for our veterans. And then, of course, when you shift into the Phase 3 health care bills that we're bringing up this week, you talk about medical malpractice. Most doctors will tell you a lot of the tests they run have nothing to do with the health care of their patients, but they have to run them to play defensive medicine. to protect against frivolous lawsuits. Those frivolous lawsuits, by the way, jack up the cost of health care by conservative estimates over $50 billion that our bill will save in providing a higher level of care for patients while also making sure that we can lower premiums. And then, of course, that CMS report that came out yesterday was so important at continuing to highlight the failures of Obamacare, those untold stories, the nearly 2 million Americans who ultimately couldn't sign up for Obamacare because the cost was too high. If you look at the estimates in that report, CBO said in 2016 over 21 million people would sign up for Obamacare exchanges. Less than half that number actually signed up. And then in 2017, they estimated 24 million Americans would sign up for Obamacare. Again, less than half of those people actually signed up, primarily citing the fact that the costs are too high. Obamacare doesn't work. That's why it's so important that our rescue mission of repeal and replace move forward.
Yeah, I'm just going to digress for a second. I tell you, this World War II museum in New Orleans, every American should go to this place. It is an incredible education experience. People should take their kids there. It really is something that everybody in this country should go view. I want to commend Chairman Rowe. I want to commend Chairman Wenstrup and all the Republicans and the Democrats who have come together to advance this legislation. This has been a long time in coming. Any of you who have reported on this scandal over the last few years know how entrenched the problems at the Veterans Administration really are. This legislation is one of, if not the biggest step we have taken to turn this page, because we have many veterans who are not only waiting for care, we have a lot of veterans who are waiting for answers. They're waiting for some recognition, any recognition that they're being heard. But instead of listening, we have had a bureaucracy that is ignoring problems, creating waiting lists, avoiding accountability. At the Toma VA in Toma, Wisconsin, the chief of staff, who the patients called the Candy Man, he was called the Candy Man because he was distributing all these narcotics he was prescribing. He got a $4,000 bonus. This came after an investigation uncovered that he was overprescribing, and it was after Jason Simkakoski, a patient at Toma, died from a fatal overdose. By the way, the pharmacist at Toma, he got a bonus also that year. The VA needs real reform, and this bill helps get that done. With this legislation, Secretary Shulkin will have the tools that he needs to deliver the kinds of changes that our veterans have been demanding. And most fundamentally, it will show our veterans that when we say that we are a grateful nation, we mean it. So we look forward to sending this major bipartisan legislation to the President's desk. We've been talking about this for about 3 years. When we uncovered all the scandals at the VA, now we're making law. Now we're bringing accountability. Now we're getting the veterans the kind of response and the accountability that they earned and deserved. And I'm very proud of these members who worked across the aisle to get this done. Anybody have any questions? Juan.
There are Republicans who are urging President Trump to fire Robert Mueller, leading this investigation into the Russia issue. Former Speaker Gingrich said it's time to rethink Mueller's role. Do you think it's wise for the Republican Party to be having this debate and discussion right now?
Yeah, I mean, all I've heard so much are rumors, but I think in the best case for the president is to be vindicated by allowing this investigation to go on thoroughly and independently.
All right, everyone, we're getting another update on that escape of the 2 inmates in Georgia, the 2 that killed correctional officers. Let's listen in.
They are armed with 9mm pistols that were taken from the correction officers. They are dangerous beyond description. If anyone sees them, they need to call 911 wherever they are and report it immediately.
Do you believe that they have left Putnam County?
I'm relatively certain at this time that they've been out of Putnam County for some time.
Where were the inmates being transferred to?
That I don't know. The corrections may be able to tell you that. That I don't know.
It's been reported.
Sir, explain how it worked on the bus. How many other inmates were on
There were a total of 33 prisoners on this bus.
And then how did they get into the
I don't know that. Obviously, this is a secure bus. How they got through the locks and things up to that area, I do not know. That's still under investigation.
Sheriff, have you been told?
Corrections officers for one of these guys is the ringleader?
I don't know that.
Is that normal just to have two
corrections? Approximately 6:45 this morning is when this incident occurred.
Okay.
Did one of the inmates shoot the officers?
I don't know. I've got confliction as to who the actual trigger men were.
And was there a feigned seizure to perhaps get the officers off guard?
I believe we have no report of that.
Were they locked inside the bus?
They were inside the caged area of the bus.
But they weren't locked to seats or anything?
No.
What time did they get to their first stop, sir?
Pardon me?
The very first stop when they were transporting prisoners.
They had left the state prison in Hancock County, and they were in transit. This occurred at approximately 6:45 this morning. That's when it happened.
Are the other inmates cooperating with the investigation, interviews?
There are some of the inmates are cooperating, and we are talking to them at this time.
Is that normal to have just two corrections officers for the 30?
The commissioner will address that if you'd address that to him.
We had heard that it's possible that one of them might be part of a prison gang, a white supremacist prison gang. Can you confirm that?
I cannot confirm that. We do have some intelligence that one of them may be.
Is it possible they're in a different vehicle by now?
Certainly, anything is possible. You know, it's not unusual when these types of crimes occur to steal one car and they know we're looking for it and get another car. That's not unusual. But at this point in time, I want to stress we're still looking for the four-door, grass green colored Honda Civic.
Do we know the relationship between Mr. Rowe and Mr. DeBose?
No.
Prior history between them?
Not that I know of.
How far are you reaching out to other authorities?
The United States of America. That's how far.
Can you explain the initial carjacking? What happened?
Apparently the car drove up behind the bus. The victim suspected it was some sort of work detail that was stopping. All of a sudden, two prisoners come out armed with handguns, ordered him out of his car.
How's he?
He's fine.
Can you clarify the inmates were involving in their last stop was Hancock? Can you just clarify that?
They had left the state penitentiary in Hancock County, and they were en route to another location.
As a work detail?
This was not a work detail. Look, let the commissioner explain that.
One more question, Sheriff. How confident are you going to catch these two men?
As confident as I am of any case. We have the full resources, the FBI, the GBI, the Department of Corrections, the Georgia State Patrol. I've got 30, 40 deputies from other counties here.
Sure.
Every police officer of any kind in this state's looking for these people.
One more question, if I could indulge you, sir. So you have two guys who you described as beyond they've killed two.
They just murdered two corrections officers. I don't think I need to explain it further.
No, I'm just saying, what is your biggest worry?
My biggest worry is they're going to kill somebody else. That's my biggest worry. Commissioner.
Before I take questions, I'd just like to say thank you for Sheriff Sills and all the partners. We've got federal, state, all the authorities here helping us with this event. It's a tragic event this morning. We've lost two of our fellow officers, two of our kin. We see our officers as our family, and I appreciate the support that other law enforcement across this state has provided because they're their family as well. I would say that we had two great officers, Officer Monica and Officer Ballou, great individuals. Both were tenured officers with us, 8 and 10 years. Both leave behind families. So remember those officers, and I feel assured we're going to put all the resources we can to finding these individuals and bringing them to justice. Had a question over here, was that the protocol to have two individuals? That is the protocol, so it's following standard protocol on that, and I'm open to other questions.
So two officers is the standard on a transport like that?
That is accurate.
Was one of these guys confirmed a validated Ghostface gangster?
We did have one that was a validated gang member. Yes, sir.
Are you focusing on possible Ghostface gangster connections on the street?
At this time, everything is open, and the sheriff is leading that investigation.
Do the officers wear ballistic vests?
Can you tell us which one was the gangster?
They do not have ballistic vests on. They do carry weapons.
Can you tell us which one was the gangster?
At this time, we'll release that as soon as we can.
Also, you talked earlier about you gave us a little bit more about the victims, the corrections officers who were killed, and have some information.
Yes.
Do you know their ages?
Yes. Officer Monica was with us for 8 years. He was 42 years of age. He leaves behind a wife. Officer Ballou was with us for 10 years. He was 58 years of age, and he leaves behind a father, a brother, and a sister. Please be with those family members. Sir? I have spoken to Officer Ballou's families, and I have not yet gotten in touch with Officer Monica's families, but we have had other officials at both of their houses working with them, and they're dealing with it the best they can at this point.
I have two questions. One is just sort of release some pictures of those two folks.
We have released those pictures. Yes, sir.
The second question is, let's go back to your bus for a second. Explain to us how you had 33 inmates in the bus. How did the inmates get from the secure area to the driver's section?
That is the primary part of this investigation, to figure that out.
Any idea at all?
Do not have any at this point.
Is this an older bus? Is the gate typically locked?
Yes, that gate is typically locked.
So it should have been locked?
Yes, sir.
And at some point, they managed to get through the gate and overpower the bus?
That's what it appears.
Is this an older bus? An older
No.
vehicle?
Do y'all know the age of the bus?
2015.
2015 bus.
2015.
Yes, sir.
Is that an example of the bus, or is that the bus itself?
No, that's a good example.
That's an example. It is not the bus.
So are there cameras on the bus?
Somebody help me out. Are there
Yes,
cameras?
there are cameras on the bus, and we're trying to review that now. We know who did this. We've got a crime scene. We've got a mobile crime scene. You know, the importance of us looking at that video is not our importance right. What's important to us right now. What's important to us right now is finding these two escaped dangerous convicts.
I will say, do you have the video? Releasing it would be helpful.
I will not release it. It's going to be evidence in this case, and it will not be released.
Can you talk about the cooperation?
The bus has been moved from the scene.
Cooperation from the other inmates and how they helped you?
The most vital information that I obtained, I was one of the first people on the scene, came from an inmate, obviously. Okay.
Sheriff, did the perpetrators leave these other inmates, these 31, locked up, or were they?
They were still sitting on the bus. The door was closed. When we arrived on the scene, we had to force entry into the bus. The
inmates were on the bus at the time of the shooting?
Yes.
Was this a crime of opportunity, or was it thought out and planned?
We don't know that at this time.
Sheriff, where are you guys searching?
We are searching everywhere in America. One of these individuals is from Madison County, Georgia, in the Coma area. We know the other one is originally from Middle Tennessee, and that's what we know. There's sheriffs, police officers, United States Marshals, FBI agents fanning out all over this nation right now, interviewing people related to this incident. No, they did not. They got the victim of the carjacking cell phone. They threw it out on the side of the road. We located it, and my detectives have actually found it.
So you don't believe they have anything other than the guns in their vehicle?
Not at this time, that's all I know.
And again, they could be headed anywhere.
They could be headed anywhere. That goes without saying. They went west towards Eatonton at 6:45 this morning, okay? They're obviously what prisoners do when they escape like this. They break into homes. The first thing they're going to get is clothes, and we're looking for incidents like that have occurred here in Middle Georgia right now first.
Have you had any reported sightings?
Not at this time.
Can you talk about the transportation a little bit more? Was this a planned trip? Did they have any idea that they were going to be going on a bus and having this, I guess, opportunity?
Today was a typical transport day. The offenders do not know when they're being transported, so they would not have known that. A question earlier was, where were they going from? They were not coming from a county jail as mentioned. They were leaving the state prison in Hancock to go toward Jackson to our diagnostic facility, which is a hub to go to another facility.
Could you talk a little more about this possible white supremacist gang? I assume it's Du Bois, because he's the one that's got the tattoos on him. Are we concerned that he could be getting some assistance from outside of that?
I cannot at this time, and there's no indications that has anything to do with this at this time. We're still investigating.
Is there reason to believe they may have got help from the outside at all?
Not at this time. We just don't know. We're investigating this. It doesn't look like, there's certainly no connection between the victim of the carjacking, so therefore, that was opportunistic at some point in time. I'm not going to tell you that they didn't plan to escape today, but we don't have any information about that at this time.
Sheriff, any message for those on the run if they're perhaps listening to you on the radio or watching you on TV?
As I've said earlier, they need to surrender before we find them.
Can you talk about your initial reaction when you first came on the scene? What did you see? What?
I saw two brutally murdered corrections officers. That's what I saw. I have their blood on my shoes. Now we're going to go in. I'm not coming back out unless I have something new to tell you. I'm going to send somebody out with a photograph of this vehicle in about 10 minutes. An actual photograph of this vehicle.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Could you get your name and title?
My name is Greg Dozier, D-O-Z-I-E-R, and I'm the Commissioner of the Georgia Department of Corrections.
Okay, everyone, again, that was another press conference from officials there in Georgia. In case you missed this story, it's very tragic for those officers, the family of those officers who were killed. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the pictures of the inmates wanted. There on the screen, you see the pictures of the inmates that are on the run. 2 Georgia prison guards killed by these inmates today in Putnam County. A manhunt underway for these suspects. The escaped prisoners have been identified as Donnie Russell Rowe and Ricky DuBose. Rowe 43, DuBose 24. Now, according to the sheriff's office, 30 other inmates were on a prison bus when these 2 inmates overpowered the guards, and one of the inmates then shot and killed the guards. Rowe was convicted of armed robbery and is imprisoned for life without parole. DuBose also convicted of armed robbery. Rowe has been in prison since June 2002. DuBose has been in prison only since July of 2015. Now, officials have urged people in the area not to approach the men if they see them and to instead call 911. Now, the 2 were last seen in a green Honda Civic. They carjacked an individual and they were seen escaping in a dark green Honda Civic with the Georgia plates. These prisoners are armed with 2 Glock pistols that belong to the officers. This incident occurred just southeast of Atlanta. This morning, U.S. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein condemned the killing, saying during testimony before the Senate budget panel that federal resources are being committed to help catch these fugitives. He said, quote, "An attack on any American law enforcement officer is an attack on every American law enforcement officer and the principles we all believe in." Now, the Georgia Department of Corrections have identified the fallen officers as Christopher Monica and Curtis Billou. Monica was hired in October 2009. Billou has been employed since July of 2007. All right, again, if we get any updates on this developing story, if we get any aerials of the manhunt, if these individuals are spotted, if it leads to a chase, we will carry that live for you here on News Now. Again, this is a breaking news situation from this morning, a developing story as 2 inmates are on the run, wanted for killing correctional officers. Again, these inmates are wanted. A manhunt is underway. These inmates have fled after killing prison guards on a prison bus this morning. All right, everyone. Again, we don't have any additional updates other than the ones we've given you regarding this situation in Georgia, but stay with us because if we have any breaking news on this story, if we get any live images from Georgia, any aerials, we will carry them live for you here on News Now. Here is a live look at the White House. We're going to continue with our political coverage here on News Now. More from the House Republicans this morning.
Work. That's why it's so important that our rescue mission of repeal and replace move forward.
You know, I'm just going to digress for a second. I tell you, this World War II museum in New Orleans, every American should go to this place. It is an incredible education experience. People should take their kids there. It really is something that everybody in this country should go view. I want to commend Chairman Rowe. I want to commend Chairman Wenstrup and all the Republicans and the Democrats who have come together to advance this legislation. This has been a long time in coming. Any of you who have reported on this scandal over the last few years know how entrenched the problems at the Veterans Administration really are. This legislation is one of, if not the biggest step we have taken to turn this page, because we have many veterans who are not only waiting for care, we have a lot of veterans who are waiting for answers. They're waiting for some recognition, any recognition that they're being heard. But instead of listening, we have had a bureaucracy that is ignoring problems, creating waiting lists, avoiding accountability. At the Toma VA in Toma, Wisconsin, the chief of staff, who the patients called the Candy Man, he was called the Candy Man because he was distributing all these narcotics he was prescribing. He got a $4,000 bonus. This came after an investigation uncovered that he was overprescribing, and it was after Jason Simkakoski, a patient at Toma, died from a fatal overdose. By the way, the pharmacist at Toma, he got a bonus also that year. The VA needs real reform, and this bill helps get that done. With this legislation, Secretary Shulkin will have the tools that he needs to deliver the kinds of changes that our veterans have been demanding. And most fundamentally, it will show our veterans that when we say that we are a grateful nation, we mean it. So we look forward to sending this major bipartisan legislation to the President's desk. We've been talking about this for about 3 years when we uncovered all the scandals at the VA. Now we're making law. Now we're bringing accountability. Now we're getting the veterans the kind of response and the accountability that they earned and deserved. And I'm very proud of these members who worked across the aisle to get this done. Anybody have any questions? Wong.
There are Republicans who are urging President Trump to fire Robert Mueller, the leading this investigation into the Russia issue. Former Speaker Gingrich said it's time to rethink Mueller's role. Do you think it's wise for the Republican Party to be having this debate and discussion right now?
Yeah, I mean, all I've heard so much are rumors, but I think in the best case for the president is to be vindicated by allowing this investigation to go on thoroughly and independently. So I think the best advice would be to let Robert Mueller do his job.
And Mr. Speaker, if it came to that, though, I mean, do you think you could continue to stand by this president and what sort of...
Oh, I'm not going to get it up. Look, I just said it. I think the best thing to do is to let Robert Mueller do his job. I think the best vindication for the president is to let this investigation go on independently and thoroughly. That, to me, is the smartest thing to do, the best thing to do, and that's what I think hopefully will happen. Yeah.
Speaker, on the budget, you guys are running into issues like you did last year with disagreements over the top-line spending number, and even some members are already talking about a shell budget just to get to tax reform similar to when you guys did earlier this year for health care. Do you think you can get a real budget resolution that lays out your priorities and what are the consequences of failure to do so now that you guys have the government?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So the question is about the budget. Remember, with a new president in the first year, you always have an abbreviated budget season. That's just the way budgeting with new administration works. So we always knew that we had a constricted budget and appropriation season. We're having a debate right now about how much we can assist the Pentagon and the military. So it's not a question of more resources for the military. It's just a question of the degree of how much more resources we can dedicate to the military. And that's really what this big debate is about. And then we're going to have the kind of debate about what kind of what we call reconciliation instructions are necessary, not just for tax reform, but for other kinds of things we need to make sure that we're getting the budget trajectory heading in the right direction. What's the purpose of this budget? get us on a path to balance, get working on our debt problem, which is a long-term problem, rebuild the military, and then put the kind of tools in place so we can maximize economic growth. The crown jewel of growing this economy, regulatory relief. You just saw what we did with the Choice Act last week. Tax reform. We think tax reform is absolutely critical to get 3% economic growth, to get higher wages, to get people going to work, and that is really important. That's what this budget's about. So we have lots of priorities that we're having a debate about how best we advance those priorities. We're having the kind of family conversation you have every year. When we have a resolution on that, you'll know. Deirdre.
Mr. Reiner, other Republicans have been criticizing Mueller and the team around him that he's hiring. Do you have complete confidence in Mueller and his team?
Yeah, I don't know his team. I know Bob Mueller, and I have confidence in Bob Mueller.
Last question.
Way in the back. Yeah. Yeah.
Two parts. One, did you convey your opinions to the president on Mr. Mueller that he should just let the inmates investigation continue? And if the president does
What's
go
that?
ahead and let Mr. Mueller go,
There's no debate that's going on here. You're saying this?
You're creating a debate that's not happening.
Yeah. This is. I heard this is like a rumor you heard last night. So there's really not some big debate that's occurring on this. You're creating, like I said, Kevin just met it. You're creating a debate that's not occurring here. This is something that I think was a rumor that came out last night. So.
VA and healthcare, and you're creating a rumor that's not happening.
So Kevin made a good point here. Look at what we're doing this week. We found out 3 years ago veterans were dying on these waiting lists that were occurring at the VA in Arizona and then all around America. So we uncovered a scandal, and then we realized when we were uncovering this veteran scandal, we couldn't even bring accountability to the VA. They couldn't even fire people who were grossly negligent in their jobs. So what are we doing? We're fixing this problem today. What did we do last week? We passed the Choice Act. We repealed and replaced Dodd-Frank, ended too big to fail, ended bailouts, and brought needed regulatory relief for community banks to help small businesses get credit and grow. What are we working on next week? We're working on the skills gap so that people can get the skills they need to get good jobs. The point I'm trying to make is let's put this all in perspective. We are focused on solving people's problems. What I think the American people want to know is that their government's working. Yes, these issues, I'm not saying this isn't important. These investigations are important. They need to be independent. They need to be thorough. They need to go where the facts go. But we also have a duty to serve the people that elected us to fix the problems that they're confronting in their daily lives, and that's what we're doing. Thank you.
All right, everyone, we are fair and balanced here in News Now, as I've always told you. So since we showed you the House Republicans, it's time to show you the House Democrats next.
Representatives, it's only exacerbated by the fact that they control every lever of government today, the presidency, both houses of the Congress, and yet are still unable to get any major piece of legislation passed, or even the most basic of things done, like passing a budget and passing the appropriations bills to keep government simply operating. This is a very inept Congress controlled by Republicans. The Republicans control everything, and they still can't seem to get anything done. On a brighter note from our Democratic caucus, I want to announce, along with the Vice Chair, the creation of a task force, the National Security Task Force within the House. I want to thank Seth Moulton of Massachusetts, Stephanie Murphy of Florida, and Jim Panetta of California in helping to co-chair that effort. It's important for our caucus to discuss these issues in a much more detailed way, to communicate solutions and counterpoints to the issues before the American people. It's an issue that we care tremendously about. We have experts on the committees of jurisdiction and working with our ranking members as well as those members of the committee, but really bringing the entire force of the caucus on this issue to focus on this. And I just want to thank those members for taking on this task and this responsibility. So with that, let me turn it over to my good friend and colleague, the Vice Chair of the Democratic Caucus, Linda Sanchez.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning. Well, the theme of the week is, where's the budget? The Republican-controlled government is not working well for the American people because you can see that they can't do basic things, something as basic as passing a budget. They failed to pass their budget by the April 15th deadline, which puts the appropriations process behind schedule in its work. And for the rest of the year, we will be trying to play catch-up. If no action is taken soon, we'll be relegated to passing another stopgap funding bill, or even worse, facing yet another Republican-caused government shutdown. The Republican Congress continues to drive the country towards disaster, and if they don't get their act together soon, we're going to be in really big trouble. It seems that the Republicans can't even agree amongst themselves about raising the debt ceiling. Once again, they are, through their inaction, they are risking the full faith and credit of the United States. And we've said over and over again that a failure to meet our obligations would be catastrophic for our economy and essentially hit working families the hardest. Now, Democrats are ready to work with Republicans on responsible spending legislation and to prevent a catastrophic default, but we will not negotiate with the lives of American families. If they want a debt ceiling increase to programs in order to cut programs that keep families out of poverty and feed children, then they're going to have to find those votes on their own. We will not help them make life harder for those families that are struggling in this country. And that includes, by the way, taking away health care for 23 million Americans. As Joe mentioned, the Senate is now drafting their health care proposal behind closed doors. And if they were proud of it, why wouldn't they be doing it out in the open? Why wouldn't they be holding hearings to hear from witnesses about the best ways to craft a piece of legislation? Even many GOP senators are upset that they are being shut out of the process because there are 2 or 3 people working behind closed doors, drafting a piece of legislation that no one can see, no one can read, and no one has input into. I think we should be very worried about what they might come up with. Democrats have made healthcare a priority, and we've made our priorities in healthcare crystal clear. We want lower premiums, we want to expand coverage, and we want to improve care. We have said all along that we stand ready to fix those things that need to be fixed and improved in the ACA. But what House Republicans showed the country is that their repeal and replace is just a mirage in the desert. There's no there. They don't really have a plan for what to replace the ACA with. And they can't, frankly, deliver on their health care promises. You know, it's time to get serious and confront the challenges that our country expects us as members of Congress to confront. We need to roll up our sleeves, get our hands dirty, and really deliver for the American people. We are ready, again, to improve what exists and what is working well and fixing that which is not. Pity that we don't see the same level of commitment from our Republican colleagues who can't seem to get their act together. And with that, I will call Joe back up.
So many have talked about the brilliance of Mitch McConnell. Look at the shiny object over here, what the president's doing on Russia. Don't look over here at what we're doing on health care. I think the American people need that to be brought to their attention, that what they're doing is even more obscene than what was done in the House of Representatives, where there were no hearings, there was no CBO score before the bill came to the floor. I doubt very seriously there was a CBO score brought before they have a vote in the Senate. If there is a vote in the Senate, we hope there is not a vote in the Senate, but if there is, there probably won't be a CBO score. There certainly won't be any hearings, and it really makes what happened in the House look like child's play in terms of lack of transparency. So we do hope that our Republican colleagues in the Senate get back to working in a more bipartisan way, which they're known for, and work with Democrats to actually help the American people work through these issues, these difficult issues on health care, and get a bill that will meet the needs of the American people. And with that, we'll happily ask her any questions we can. Yes.
On workforce development, given the White House's push on this, do you see any opportunities to work with them on this front, and do you see a potential platform for Terry Sewell's workforce development proposal here, or a way to advance that?
Well, we hope that there is an opportunity to work on that issue this week. This is the week. Last week was Infrastructure Week. We know that there was very little discussion or very little movement on anything in reference to infrastructure by the White House. Maybe this week on job force development there'll be a new day. Maybe we'll have some real discussion on policy moving forward and getting to things like Terry Sewell's proposal. That remains to be seen. But the reality is that these issues, they simply don't. You can't just do everything in a week. focusing on it for a week is important. But we saw last week the focus was on infrastructure. There was very little, if any, focus on a critical issue to the American people, and that is reinvesting in our nation's infrastructure. So, based on past performance, it's hard for me to, yet grade as to whether or not we'll be more successful in job development than we were in infrastructure. I don't know, Linda, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I would just add really briefly, we are very interested in the issue of workforce development, as is evidenced by Terry Sewell's work on the issue, and infrastructure. We recognize the need to invest in America's infrastructure and to grow the economy, to help move goods and services efficiently so that our economy can grow and everybody can share in that growth. But what I find from the Trump administration is they make these huge pronouncements about what they're going to do, and then nothing gets done. I mean, despite his cabinet meeting where he thinks he's accomplished more than any other president other than Roosevelt, look at legislatively what has been accomplished. All of the major issues that he swore and promised during the campaign trail that, we're going to get done have yet to get done. So it's hard to imagine that, jumping on this next issue of infrastructure and workforce development, that somehow that's going to magically, reappear and succeed when all these other projects are languishing. It doesn't speak well to their track record. And I would just add that so long as they continue to push Democrats aside and not work in a bipartisan manner, they're going to have a hard time getting this stuff done. I mean, they haven't figured that out yet through health care and their so-called tax reform. Eventually they may wake up and smell the coffee and realize that, America needs both Democrats and Republicans working together to get stuff done, and they will stop excluding us and pushing us out of the process.
Yes.
Could I ask each of you about Congressman Sherman's articles of impeachment, your views on it and what its prospects might be in the caucus and in the House?
Well, in terms of the prospects, I think you'd have to ask Mr. Sherman that. What I think is happening is there is a special prosecutor in place. That's something that the Democratic caucus had called for, and we're grateful to see that was accomplished. We also continue to call for the creation of an independent commission to look into all these issues in terms of Russia and whether or not there was collusion, whether or not there was, in terms of Mr. Flynn's involvement or other members of the president's cabinet, both post or present, or going back to the campaign. But that's what we've been asking for and calling for. We will continue to call for that. But I think in terms of the specific legislation, every member has the ability to draft and to drop in the hopper any issue they want. I think for many of us, and speaking for myself, I think we need to let the facts lead where they will. And that's why we have a special prosecutor in place and let him do his work.
Yeah, I would just say that the sentiment among the leadership and my sense among the majority of the caucus, that's that they want to see the special prosecutor go through the investigation and see where the facts lead. In any trial, I am an attorney, you have to have the facts before you can put the case together. And so I think a majority of the caucus is waiting to see where the facts lead before making a judgment. And again, as Joe said, any member can introduce any piece of legislation that they want. We are a big tent party, but again, I believe that I speak on behalf of the leadership and probably the majority of the caucus when I say that people are waiting to see where the investigation leads.
Yes, Ola.
Building on that a little bit, I know there was some heated discussion today with Capuano and I don't know, maybe others who said you should have talked to the caucus about this before doing this Lone Ranger push to Sherman. I mean, do you think that should have been a caucus-wide discussion before you started drafting these articles of impeachment and moving them around yesterday?
My recollection, and again, what happens to the caucus typically stays at the caucus, but my recollection is there was no direct conversation or indirect conversation between Mr. Capuano or any other member. I think Mr. Capuano was speaking, generally speaking, on issues of this magnitude that we need to have a conversation within the caucus before something like that moves forward. I think that's legitimate. I don't, whether it's on this or any issue, whether it's on this or on the monuments or on the veterans bill that's before us today, where there are issues of concern to the Democratic caucus. So I don't think that's unusual, quite frankly. Look, I look at this and what the president has been involved in, And I can come to my own conclusion in terms of his firing of Mr. Comey and what the cause was when he said it himself, was to end the so-called Russian investigation, as he alludes to it. Look, what happened yesterday in terms of the president's cabinet meeting was just bizarre. It's bizarre, world. He talked about that Roosevelt had to deal with depression, not the depression, but depression. Apparently, he's dealing with psychosis within his own cabinet at the moment. Apparently, but I think the American people are also more and more coming to their own determination of this. What they want us to do here in Washington is to focus on the issues that matter to them. It is about job creation. It is about health care. It is about getting a budget passed. It is about the debt ceiling. It's about all the other things that Washington should be working on. Let the issue of the special prosecutor move forward. He will do his work, assuming he's not fired. He will do his work. If other things happen, we'll be happy to address them at that point. But consensus of the caucus, as I see it, is let the special prosecutor do his work. Yes.
Mr. Crowley, we're stepping back just a little bit. Do you think the media's coverage of the controversies in the Trump administration is more severe than that surrounding the Obama administration, or even the Clinton cabinet, the Clinton when she was the Secretary of State? Are we having a double standard of some kind?
Oh, I don't think there's any double standard. I think you were very severe on Hillary Clinton and following all the investigations that took place here in Washington, and rightly so in terms of transparency. These are issues of magnitude to the American people. I think that the nation is in crisis right now. I think the issue of Russia is an incredibly important issue. But right now we have our committees that are the chairs and ranking members of the requisite committees investigating the issue. They're doing their job. We have a special prosecutor who's been appointed. He's doing his job. We would like to see that further enhanced by the creation of a permanent independent commission to delve even a deep dive in terms of building back confidence by the American people in its government, understand what the Russians attempted to do, what they accomplished, what they failed to do, what they want to do again, and how can we prevent it. That's what I think the independent commission can accomplish for the American people, because we're all in this. Our democracy was attacked. Our democracy, many believe, is under threat. And so for all of those reasons and those issues, I think we need to let people do their jobs.
And Ms. Sanchez, do you think we have any double standard in how we're covering the controversies?
I don't. I mean, the traditional role of press is that of providing information and transparency and getting to the bottom of what is going on. When you step into the public arena and you run for public office, you know that going in, everything that you do and say is going to be subject to the scrutiny of reporters. And if you don't have the stomach for it, you're in the wrong profession. I mean, we are at a very precarious situation right now in terms of electronic media, the 24-hour news cycle, where anybody can allege anything, and if it's repeated enough, people begin to believe it, the so-called era of fake news. And so I think thoughtful and critical reporting is more important than ever in terms of trying to get information out to the American people. And again, I just feel like if you step into a public role, if you have an ego to run for president but don't have the stomach to do the hard slog through all of the difficult parts of it, then you're in the wrong office. You're in the wrong job.
Yes.
Following back on the Sherman measure, have you or other Democratic leaders specifically given him guidance on how to move forward or not move forward on potentially bringing this up as a privileged resolution on the floor?
I haven't spoken to him. Have you spoken to him?
No.
No, we haven't had any conversation with him.
Putting everyone on the record about this in a procedural floor vote, would that be helpful?
But I think we might be getting ahead. We don't know what he's going to do at this point, and that's up to Mr. Sherman to determine what he'll do, or what any other member will do with that when it comes to a privileged resolution. So I don't want to speculate or at this point, but what I can say is that clearly in the discussion within the caucus, the call for a further discussion before measures like that are brought to the floor. Again, every member has the right to bring a measure before the floor if he or she chooses to do so, using themselves as guidance, as we hope that they would use the guidance of the caucus as well in determining bringing that forward. I do think the issue of impeachment is a very profound issue, one that strikes at the core of our democracy. and for our ability to balance and counterbalance the powers of the three branches of government, whether it's in the legislative in the use of impeachment, the judicial use of impeachment, as well as the executive use of impeachment. Something that we need to do in a very sacred way, because it is ensconced in our Constitution. It speaks directly as to who we are as a people. Fair play, the rule of law, the evidentiary proceedings, albeit the president is significantly different in many respects in terms of what he can or cannot be indicted for, etc. But that's why we have a special prosecutor to delve into it. Let it lead where it will. If there's no there, there's no there. If there is, that's a different issue. And then I think we would do ourselves a service, and more importantly, would do the American people a service if we allowed for the process to work its way through. Short of that is we're doing a disservice to ourselves, and what the accountability we hold the president to should be no more nor no less than any other American citizen. Any other questions? Well, we thank you all very much and enjoy your week, and we'll see you throughout the week.
Push.
Quit speaking, Mike.
You left.
You did.
I'm teasing.
All right, everyone. So that was the House Democrats holding their weekly press conference as well. We're going to continue with our political block here on News Now. We're going to show you this event from this morning featuring our Vice President, Mike Pence, talking health care. First,
tells me about what's in this man's heart. In Indiana and other states where I worked, we felt strongly that governors and state legislators needed flexibility to come up with plans that work best for their unique situations. And when states have gotten that flexibility, the results have been impressive. The freedom to innovate and in Medicaid, however, has been hard to come by. We've also seen impressive results when states are permitted the flexibility to innovate in the delivery of human services, like under TANF. The expertise this department brings to bear is unbelievably impressive, but I think we can all agree that Washington does not always know best. State innovation is key to providing high quality of health care and human services. One of President Trump's key priorities for health care is empowering states to innovate and restore balance to the federal-state partnership. The same dynamic applies when it comes to how our federal health care programs, Medicare especially, sometimes takes a one-size-fits-all approach to issues. Patients and physicians are better off deciding for themselves. To get to a patient-centered, sustainable healthcare system, we have to find a better balance than what we've had in the past. And someone who understands the importance of listening to doctors and to states so well is our boss, Dr. Tom Price, whose career in public service and medicine has set him up perfectly for the role that he has today. So let's have a round of applause for the 23rd Secretary of the Health and Human Services, Dr. Tom Price.
Thanks, Seema, so very much for that kind introduction, and thanks for all of the work that you do and your whole team over at CMS. You do a great, great job, and we're thankful every single day that you're here. Good morning. What a treat this is, I tell you, to be able to have the honor of the Vice President coming today to bring greetings from the President of the United States. Now, I'm told that it's been a number of years since either a President or a Vice President came and visited us here at the Humphrey Building. And to give word and voice and honor for the work that all of you do. So, Mr. Vice President, I want to thank you for coming here today. We've got some great, great folks out here who are doing incredible work on behalf of the administration. This team here and those that you all, that you represent, do incredible work each and every day. whether it's supporting folks from in all states across this nation on the human services side, or doing the remarkable cutting-edge research that's done at NIH, or the work that's done at CDC or SAMHSA, or all of the staff divisions that we have here within HHS. You all do incredible work. And that impact, as you all well know, goes beyond the borders of the United States. As some of you know, we took a trip to Liberia recently, and I was so incredibly impressed with the brave men and women of the Public Health Service Corps, CDC, HRSA, NIH, all of the men and women who are on the front lines, who helped our local partners beat back Ebola in West Africa. And I can't tell you how moving it was for me on behalf of you to meet some of the Ebola survivors in Liberia. These are individuals who are alive today in no small part due to American generosity and ingenuity and passion and caring. So I just want to give you and all of us an opportunity to give a huge round of applause to the HHS team and the work that we're doing around the world. But as you know, the story doesn't end there. We are now helping to build up local government capacity in West Africa and literally around the world so that folks won't face that kind of crisis again. So it's with great pride and cognizant of this department's wonderful and remarkable achievements that we welcome the Vice President here today. I'm lucky enough to have known the Vice President for a number of years, over 15 years now. Had the privilege of serving with him in the United States Congress. We worked on budget activities and health care activities, and he is now taking the lead, working with Congress to execute the President's health care priorities, which he'll share with you in just a moment. Also had the privilege of traveling with the Vice President to Wisconsin and Ohio earlier this year, and we met with small business folks, and they shared their concerns that they had. I can tell you that this is an individual, the Vice President is an individual who has a unique ability to connect with folks where they are, to understand and appreciate the concerns that they have. And they were voicing their concerns about their businesses and about the healthcare system. And healthcare is such a focus for President Trump because the situation right now in many, many areas, as you know, is simply unacceptable. You all know the challenges that many Americans face generally because you work on these issues every single day. Getting us to a health care system where every American is able to afford and gain quality health care and health coverage is not an easy task. You know that. But getting us there is a goal that each and every one of us share. One of the toughest challenges we have right now, as you know, is in the individual and small group market. We've seen rapidly rising premiums and deductibles that are going up, making it much more difficult for the millions of Americans out there to gain the kind of coverage that they want for themselves and for their families. Even with the higher prices, we get word every single day, virtually, that insurers are either leaving the market or the exchanges or threatening to do so. So fixing this situation, as the saying goes, requires an act of Congress. And the President understands and appreciates that. But there's much more that we can do right here at HHS, and with the President and the Vice President's support and leadership, we can do a lot to improve the situation currently. And I want to highlight a couple of those things that President Trump and HHS have done just in the past few months. The actions that we've taken, as you all well know, fall into three basic categories or buckets. Stabilizing insurance markets and increasing choices for patients, opening up new options for enrolling in insurance, and encouraging state innovation. And all of these are done with a focus on trying to get to a patient-centered healthcare system. One of the very first regulatory actions that we took under this administration was a rule that has now been finalized, which covers a whole range of issues, with the main goal of that rule to help stabilize insurance markets, trying to put downward pressure on the premium increases that folks have seen. So we tried to bring clarity to the special enrollment periods, to the grace periods in enrollment, and tried to give states greater opportunity to define what constituted a qualified health plan. These new rules encourage people to stay enrolled with insurance the entire year so that helps result in a healthier risk pool. And within the same regulation, we also loosened the rules a bit to give folks an opportunity to have expanded plans and coverage plans options for them. In addition, we also tried to make enrollment simpler. Many of you know about the shop exchanges, the small business exchanges that are out there. What we saw, however, was a remarkable decrease or minimal uptake for the shop exchanges. So what we've tried to do is to begin simplifying the processes so that individuals are able to get their coverage through either a marketplace or through a broker on the shop exchange. We also responded to feedback from individual consumers who said that healthcare.gov was a greater challenge than they had desired for them, and so we've tried to provide an alternative online tool. And then the last major goal that we pursued was trying to encourage state innovation. Much of our healthcare system, as you know, depends on a functioning, working collaboration, a partnership between the federal and state government. A lot of these partnerships, however, especially in the area of Medicaid, haven't been working as true partnerships. And we learned that from talking with state officials, yes, and with governors, but folks who are in the system itself have appreciated that it hasn't been working as smoothly as it should. So President Trump, Vice President Pence, and this administration are absolutely committed to fixing that. The Affordable Care Act took a lot of power away from the states in both their role as insurance regulators and in terms of how they run their Medicaid programs. So protecting patients across our lands means resetting those federal-state partnerships and paving the way for states to innovate. So we've made a firm commitment to allowing innovation both in the Medicaid system and in the individual group market and small group market at the state level, and we're glad to see some innovations already coming forth. You read about them every day. This morning we read about Iowa bringing forth some really novel ideas about how they can innovate in that state and make certain their citizens have coverage. Along with CMS, we released a state innovation checklist to help states accelerate their plans to alleviate burdens caused by the current law and to fast-track those changes. There are a whole lot more plans and changes that we have in the offing, and we're working on them, and as you know, every single day. If you have any interest in looking at them, you can go to hhs.gov/relief, hhs.gov/relief, and you'll see more of the actions that we have taken to protect patients. We view these administrative actions as a key piece of work that we do here at HHS to improve the health and the well-being of the American people. But we can't do this job alone here from the Humphrey Building. As you know, I like to talk about our job, our roles being focused on patients and people and partnerships. And the partnership that we have with this administration working toward health reform is so incredibly encouraging. A big part of that is the leadership and expertise brought to the table by the Vice President of the United States. I used to be able to say that, this gentleman had a heart as big as the entire state of Indiana.
All right, guys. Well, it sounds like Tom Price is introducing our Vice President, Mike Pence. Unfortunately, you're going to have to hear from the Vice President a little bit later on today. We'll play it for you later today, we promise. But we are now going to have to shut down the stream because we are launching a very special stream in just a couple minutes. You can find it on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Fox10Phoenix. It will launch in 5 minutes. That's right, it's a stream dedicated to the Jeff Sessions testimony. He'll be testifying before the Senate Intelligence Committee. Our coverage starts in 5 minutes. Stay tuned. Mike Page is really excited to be with you guys.